I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here today with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you about living joyfully. And it is important that we all experience an abundance of joy in our lives, because the more joy that we have, the healthier, the happier, the more abundant we are in all things.
Exactly. And we've been reading more and more about doctors using joyfulness as a means of healing, medical doctors, the allopathic doctors. And I think that's such a wonderful thing that they're seeing how important that is and how it impacts on everyone's life.
Absolutely. Laugh therapy
Hmm.
in oncology units is now a standard treatment. And there are a number of oncologists in the country, as you know, who promote the concept of watching videos at least 4 hours a day, 4 hours of laughing a day. And the more robust our laughing is, the more powerful it is to create the healing force within us. So,
Yes, and as we always say, you and I so often say everything is energy and vibration. So we create a certain vibration in our lives with that energy, and it does make a total difference. I was reading something just yesterday. A woman, a psychologist, was treating a man who had very critical health problems, and it looked as if the the medical doctor had said he couldn't help him anymore, that he was incurable. So she worked with him with affirmations and and to live joyfully, to deliberately know that he's going to live a joyful life and work at it. But the affirmations were all positive, and she taped a 1/2 hour series of affirmations for him to use every night, and he used that every night. He followed her advice, and he healed. And that's such a wonderful thing to know that it, what we think and put into our head is what we end up with reflecting in our bodies. And it had been his habit to go to sleep at night watching TV, and then he would waken after a time and turn the TV off, or perhaps it turned itself off after a time. In any event, he had put those negative thoughts in his head that the TV shows were bringing through, and it made so again. It it saved his life. This new practice that he used.
mhm. Being joyful has, of course, many benefits, but what does someone do when they are just not a joyful person?
Well, I that's a challenge, and it's a challenge for the people around them. But for one thing, they can surround themselves with people who are joyful, and go places where people are joyful. And if they have friends who telephone them with bad news all the time and everything is a downer, then to speak with those people briefly and also talk with them that it's a matter of health, of the person's health, to speak in a joyful way. And so we can control our environment to a very great extent, and that's what we have to do.
Mhm. And so we can change.
Right,
We have the ability to change.
exactly.
And that's the magnificent thing about being the human and spiritual beings that we are, because we can change anything and everything about ourselves if we choose to do so.
Yes, as we often say, life is a series of choices. We can choose to be, and we've all gone through this. We've all gone through getting up in the morning and we think we wish we could just go hide our head under the covers and never have to come out. And then there's other times we jump out of bed and we think life is joyful. But if we just keep putting one foot in front of the other and do the things we need to do, then I can remember a long time ago, I taught for 14 years, I taught in a school of self improvement. And one thing we said at the very beginning of the class was uh, study yourself, look at yourself, do all you can to change that which you wish to, and then forget yourself. And I often think of that now in my own life. Now I'm older and I have the opportunity to stay home and stay in bed or get up and slouch around or make myself look presentable. So, sure enough, I've proved it with my own actions now that when we make ourselves look presentable and it makes us be far more joyful. And when we think happy, pleasant thoughts and take time for prayer and meditation, then we're far more joyful. So we have to look at our life and see what makes us not joyful.
Mhm.
Whatever we're doing that makes us joyful, we can just keep on doing. But study those things that make us not joyful, and then change them.
Mhm. And it's interesting that in the school, this attitude of joyfulness was so much a part of what you were teaching
Hmm.
in order to create stronger, more powerful, more fulfilled human beings and more beautiful people as
Hmm.
well, was the
Hmm.
point, wasn't it?
And happier,
Mhm.
because people are so much more happy in their own life and in their own right if they have a joyous outlook on life. And we can see that in the people around us. And the people who are positive in their approach to life are far more joyful.
Mhm. The concept that you touched upon, which is really intriguing to me, is to forget ourselves. And that's a wonderful idea and a wonderful concept, and something that we could probably all benefit from to a large extent. And of course, a lot of us have things in our lives that we think about as our strong points, and so we try to accentuate those. But I'm thinking now about how many of us have negative attributes and negative emotions. And if we could just forget about ourselves, we would be able to act and be the people that we're supposed to be.
Mhm. That's true. I hadn't thought of the great importance of that, but I see your point. And when we forget ourselves, it means if our hair doesn't quite look the way we want it to, then we just brush it back the best we can and forget it.
Mhm.
And if we have blemishes on our face, we cover them over if we can and wash our face and use good hygiene and forget it. And if our teeth aren't the way we wish they were, we can brush them, be glad we have teeth and forget it. So we can do all that we can to change ourselves, to make ourselves look better, and then put it out of our minds and not indulge in negative thinking. And if we have friends and relatives that are making us unhappy or uneasy at that time, we can pray for them, or we can pray for ourselves. We can uh, put it out of our minds, d- give it some thought, work with it, give it treatments, but then forget it. And so that's, I think, what when we get into trouble emotionally in life, it's
Mhm.
because we're not able to forget, and we all hit those blocks.
Yeah.
We don't say, well, we've learned that lesson.
Yeah, you touched on something that I think may be new in terms of the concept to some people, and that is treating, and through prayer treatment,
Hmm.
as we talk about, and Ernest Holmes and others talked about scientific prayer treatment, and so we can treat a problem, can't we?
Yes, we can. We always can. We treat ourselves the way the doctor tells us, or someone tells us to treat for our health. But we can treat mentally, and we can treat for other people too. And the way we treat is to visualize the highest that we want to see there, whether it's finances or good food in our pantry, or even a special person in our life, whatever it is we want, whatever we yearn for, then if we think we'll never get it, we'll probably never get it. But if we treat and see that situation just the way we want it to be, and asking God to make it manifest if it's right for us or right for the other person. But I would like to say one thing right now, that we don't treat for other people as specifically unless they've asked us to, just as we don't pray for other people specifically unless they've asked us to. And a lot of people question me on that, but I think that I'm sure you agree that we don't know what's best for other people, but we know that we can send them love and light and creativity and goodness in their life, and pray for their highest good. And sometimes we might overuse that word, praying for people's highest good, but it's all encompassing if we're just asking for the best for that person, what's best in their life.
hmm and to let it go,
Yes,
and let it go. That
totally.
comes back to this issue of letting it go again.
Yeah.
We can't. So many of us have difficulty letting circumstances and situations go, and I think in metaphysics and New Thought, people are prone to not necessarily to that stream, but to the stream of wanting and knowing what is the cause of everything. Everything has a cause, and so it becomes a wearisome kind of a mantra that people, well, why is this happening, or this is happening because I know this and this and this, and so it's happened. So
Yeah.
now is the importance isn't that it's happened. The importance is what we do with it once that what we do with the experience once it has taken place.
Yes, and sometimes we think that the end of the world has come when certain circumstances happen in our life or the lives of others. And then later on, we can, in retrospect, see that that was a very wonderful happening. And it was very important that we go over a certain threshold or take certain steps when at the time we might think this is the end of the world. So I suppose that's just having faith and trust in God, isn't it? And the
It is.
goodness of life.
Mhm. And when we have that faith and trust, then joy is a sign of the manifest presence. The presence is always there, but the manifestations that come forth from the presence and the power of God are exhibited through our joyfulness of life and thought and action and mind and happiness. And interestingly, it shouldn't surprise anyone, but it does, that people like to be around happier people. People like to be around joyful people. People don't like to be around people who are sad and unhappy and negative all of the time. And so, if we want to be surrounded by wonderful people, and if we want to have a large circle of friends, and if we want to be a part of this physical human experience, the best way is to be joyful and to be happy and to be positive and to surround ourselves with people of like mind.
Right, and don't try and tell anyone else how to live their life,
Mhm.
but just live our own life as highly as possible and as joyously as possible.
Mhm. And yet, that seems to be so difficult for so many people.
Well, it's just I suppose it's a habit, isn't it? That's the way people think. And we can look at some people who have lots of problems, health problems, and other problems in their lives, and yet they are joyous and they live a joyous life. And that can really inspire us
Mhm.
a hundredfold. And so uh, we have to remember that the way we live our lives reflects out in the world and reflects in the people around us. And as you said, if we're too morose too much of the time, then people stay away and they don't want any part of that.
Mhm. Absolutely. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you some information.
Mike and Iris invite you to be with them every Sunday morning at the magnificent and historic Scottish Rite Cathedral, located at 855 Elm Avenue in Long Beach. Our worship service and Sunday school begin at 11 a.m. Angelus Unity Cathedral Church at the Scottish Rite Cathedral meets in the only true cathedral church located in the city of Long Beach. This magnificent grand building is a true architectural jewel. The service begins at 11 a.m. and there is Sunday school for the children. There is always plenty of free parking in the cathedral lot. Mike and Iris look forward to meeting you and your family this Sunday. People of all faiths are always welcome. We will be saving you a seat this Sunday at Angelus Unity Cathedral Church at the Scottish Rite Cathedral. You will be warmly welcomed.
Before the break, we were talking about how you and I both have known people who have been in dire circumstances, and yet they've been filled with joy. I know you did a lot of hospice work, and over the years, our fellowship has worked a lot with people, and we actually, for many years, had a transition ministry, which worked with people who were making their transition and preparing to make their transition. And it was a very fulfilling aspect of our work. But that is so true that we can see people that are facing the most difficult situation in life, the very loss of their human life and life on this earth plane, and yet out of it they are still able to be joyful. And those people, interestingly, suffer less pain, less discomfort, are surrounded by more people who support them, and have all of the attributes that we've been talking about. And we always think about one particular person in our fellowship who had cancer, and the cancer was very rapid, and we prayed for her healing, and she sought all kinds of treatments, and none of them were successful from a physical standpoint, and so she made her transition. But as she moved through the process of that 5-month period, she moved from uh, utter despondency and unhappiness and sadness to a wonderful acceptance, and actually a great joy at many of the things that took place, especially in the last couple of years of her life, and the reconciliation with her families, members, and a closeness with her husband that she hadn't had for many, many years. And so good and great things happen all the time.
Yes, and it even surprises the person who's most involved.
Mhm.
I know it surprised that lady that her life turned out to be so wonderfully joyous. And we can all take lessons from others. I can, um, I, I know that when we suffer, when someone we love dies, we think we'll never be the same again, and we're not the same again, but we might be better than we've been before. And when we think that we'll never smile again, and it takes a long time sometimes for us to smile. But I think what we need to do is just see what makes us laugh and what makes us joyful, and then change our habits and change our patterns.
Mhm.
And I can remember doing that myself. And at the time, I didn't realize how essential it was to get out of my home and be out in the public. And someone had been asking me to come work for them, and I did after the death of my daughter after several months. And it was the best thing I ever did. And I think that, and I prayed for guidance. And I think when we pray for guidance and then take it, listen, and use it, then that's the ticket. That's what we need. And I can remember then 2 or 3 months after I'd been working away from my home, one lady said, "If I could be as carefree as that young woman in the other store, I would really have it made." And the lady whom she said that to was a lady I knew, and she said, "Well, you don't know what Iris has been through," and she told her the various things, um, including the death of my daughter. And so that lady called me and wrote. Uh, she called me and said that that lady had told her about my misfortune in my life, and she said, "Do you mind if I just ask you some questions?" And I said, "You'd be welcome to ask me anything you wish." And so she talked about, she had gone through a death of her brother. Her brother had committed suicide in a motel room, and she couldn't get over that death, and she couldn't get beyond it. And I could relate to that 100%. So we all learn lessons from our own lives and from our own what we've done. But most of all, we learn to look to a higher power and then follow that. And whatever message we receive, then follow it. And sometimes we think, well, that's foolish. That's not what I need to do. I have other responsibilities. But when we pray and ask for guidance,
Mhm.
we have to honor that
Yes.
and use that guidance that comes to us. And very often it will be, it could be any number of things.
Mhm. Yeah, and we have to use our intellect and our spiritual strength to realize that if we're not happy, that we need to honor the emotions and the feelings that we have at the present time. We're never ever to, and I think that's another area where New Thought and metaphysics gets into a very dangerous area, where there's a denial of the reality of how we feel. And you've heard me say often enough from the platform and also in small groups that we, what is it that I always say? Uh,
We live in our minds and
yeah,
not in
we
the
live in our
world.
minds, but I lost my train of thought. Where were we?
Well, you were saying that what you always tell people is to look within.
Uh-huh.
Look within and see what's there and honor that.
Honor it, yes.
Yes,
And so if you feel sad, you're sad. If
exactly.
you're depressed, you're depressed. And so don't deny that reality, but don't claim it and live on it and stay there. Decide whether or not you want to stay there. And if you do, that's all right too. That's your business.
Most people
But
don't.
most people don't. And so then out of that comes the feeling and the understanding of joy. We're not talking about people who begin to applaud when their loved ones die. The grieving process is a normal process that we go through. So we want to go through the normal emotional and feelings uh, that we have as human beings and as spiritual beings. And then we want to release those negative feelings and emotions. And sometimes it takes professional help, and sometimes we can do that ourselves with prayer and meditation. But as we do that, we begin to grow spiritually, and we allow the joy to begin to bubble within us. And then we get better and better at being joyful. But we can't deny how we feel. And I think that we do people a great disservice when we chide them and when we say, oh, don't say that or don't feel that way. And of course, when we talk to people who are ready to make their transition, one of the things that I've found over the years is they want to talk about it, but
Mhm.
most people don't want to allow them to talk about it. So they'll say, oh, don't talk that way. Well, we oughtn't to be telling people don't talk that
That's
way. We
right.
ought to be able to tell people, say what's on your heart and on your mind, and I won't judge you and I won't blame you, and I'm here to listen and to support and to help you. And maybe that's a clinical approach, but I think that maybe we need some of that clinical approach to the misuse of spirituality that we have sometimes.
Yes, and when that's a form of honesty, isn't it? We have to be honest with ourselves, just as we're honest with others, and we have to see what it is that's making what we can do differently. And we think just, and sometimes we just need to have some quiet time alone and be quiet. So we have to see what it is we need. And there's not any one panacea. We can't tell anyone, do any one specific thing. But we can look at people's habits and patterns. And if it's not working, then suggest something different if they ask us. But more than that, we can do it in our own lives. And if we take care of our own needs within, then it reflects out to others and it makes a difference in the whole world.
And if our life isn't joyful, then we need to look at why it isn't joyful and we need to change it.
Yes.
And that has to do with personal responsibility, which is
Mm.
fundamental to what we teach. And we all have personal responsibility for ourselves. We have some limited responsibility for others, but the primary responsibility we have is to and for ourselves. And so we need to understand that and we need to embrace that concept and idea.
And when we do understand it, we have a deeper uh, viewpoint of our own inner needs and what we can do to change our lives. And so then we have to have the courage to make those changes. And if it doesn't work, then try something else. But usually, it's just a change of pace. But when people have gone through a great tragedy or great trauma, then they need a change of pace. And it's just changing sometimes the environment part of the day. And we can volunteer in certain areas, or we can seek employment in certain fields. But being around people, other people, is usually one way for people to regain their joyousness. I've seen throughout my life that that's one of the most important things. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. Yes. And we need to strengthen ourselves. And as we strengthen ourselves and our resolve, to improve and change our lives, then wonderful things begin to happen. And that doesn't mean that it's always easy. And it doesn't mean that running away or going somewhere else is the solution, although sometimes that is the solution, not running away, but going somewhere else. And so if we have a job, or if we have neighbors, or if we have a circumstance or situation that's extremely difficult, then we just begin to deal with that circumstance and situation. And we begin to do the work, if you will.
Yes, and when we do, then we're more joyous, and we're able to carry our joyousness out wherever we go and wherever we are. I can remember a group of children who used to go to my Sunday school, and so the minister would always say, "Here come those smiling," and with their using their last name, because just smiling, people smiling like that, lifts the spirits of others. So when we go out and look at people, like when we go to the market to shop for whatever we're going to shop for, if we look at people, make eye contact and act cheerful, it it just reverberates throughout the place, and it's like a chain reaction, isn't it?
And if we do that over and over again, despite the way that we feel or the way that our life is going, we are able to get better and better at it.
Yes, but it's so easy just to sit back and say, "Woe is me," and nothing's ever going to change. And I've just got to be alone because I've got to get through this alone. And again, sometimes we do need alone times. We need times to be just alone. But overall, whatever's not working, then change it.
Absolutely. Great advice. So whatever is not working, change it and you will be joyful. That's what Dr. Freelander said. And so we hope that you found this information to be useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.